All right, welcome back to another TouchDesigner meetup. Finally, it's really been a while. I don't even know when exactly the last one was, but it was definitely some months ago. And yeah, my name is Bileam. I will be your host for today, and our topic for today is gonna be interactivity. And we got 5 speakers, 3 groups of presenters presenting today. We got Linus, Eric, and Ismail from Germany, talking about their project. And then Heckaman and Harvey Moon. Okay, so without further ado, I'd say we get started with the first presenters. So please, Linus, Eric, and Ismail, please start.
Okay, cool. All right. Thank you for the introduction. Erik, Linus, and I are 3 students from Ravensburg, and we are going to present our third semester project, the Urban Sports Festival. And we are currently in the 4th semester, and we did the project with the topic interactivity. And the Urban Sports Festival is a festival that will take place in July 2025, and our goal was to make it more interactive for the viewers. The Urban Sports Festival is a festival where there will be skaters, BMX, parkours, and also like food trucks and DJs and some bands. And for the target groups, we set the goal to give them a value, like add to the value that the skaters and BMX riders already give. And yeah, and for this task, we had 3 target groups: the professionals, the amateurs, and the we focused on skating, and yeah, we focused on skating and made the whole visualization for everything like after that. And this the skate tricks always go by in seconds, in split seconds, and the movements are very like it's small movements that decide if the trick is very hard or if it's easy. And to show how the tricks are like the different difficulty levels, we try to visualize it differently. So therefore, we made the Urban Sports Festival. The Urban Sports Festival is a festival. Urban Motion is the festival that we called it, because we focus on the motion and the positioning of the skater and the tracking of this line and the visualization of the tricks. Therefore, we made the motion trails visual, and like if you see the skater right, you will see the motion trail behind the skater, and if the skater is doing a trick, then you will see, okay, now is the trick, and therefore is a big visualization on the ramp. Our goal was to make it like urban and graffiti-like, and that's where the whole design, the branding is coming from. And different tricks have different, also we coded it for every trick differently. And if the trick is more complex, so the visuals will get more complex as well. And therefore we made a miniature fingerboard ramp, and we made it like it's like a simulation for the real big one. Yeah.
Yes. So it's a 1 to 10 rebuild of a real mini ramp. Our project leader from the Urban Sports Festival mentioned that it should be like a mini ramp. It's not a whole course like Red Bull skateboarding events. It's a smaller mini ramp, and you can also use it in our case, like for fingerboarding. It's also practical for the festival customers or the festival visitors to ride with the fingerboard when they are not skaters or when they are not like into it, so they don't have to get damaged and they only can do it with the fingerboard ramp. Yes, the picture is in front of our atelier when we built this out of concrete and styrofoam, I guess it's called. Yes. So next, please. Yes, we got a quick video. That's a small example of how the competition run can look. It works with the color tracking. You can see the board. I also got it here. It's orange on the top, and yes, that's for you also have to wear gloves because the skin in combination with the beamer light, it's also getting kind of orange levels, and yes, that's because we wear gloves. And in real life or in real skating, it's not the color tracking. So we got a sensor. It's called Spinex. They presented it to us. It's like it's on it's on the bottom of the board, and it recognizes every trick of the skater, and it's made simple, but yes, for fingerboarding, it's way too big. Yeah, you can see those tricks Ismail already said. Yeah. Those are our explanation posters. We have 5 basic tricks we've chosen from a huge amount of skateboard tricks. We got the stall and the grind here. I quick explain it to you. A stall is when you keep staying on the coping of the ramp for a couple of time, and how longer you stay on the coping, the bigger the shape gets and the more complex it gets. And yeah, there you have to see the difficulty of the trick, however it goes bigger or smaller. Yes, and grind. The grind is, you probably know it from other skateboard videos or something. That's very common, how you slide it on rails, or in this case on the coping. Here it's the length and also the size of the shape. How long you grind, then it gets bigger and the shape is more complex, and the grind should be more difficult for the viewer to look at. Those 3 tricks are the basic tricks from skateboarding. We have it. It comes out of the motion trail. In our simulation, they are integrated by pressing a button. In real size skateboarding, the Spinex sensor can also recognize them all. And we have to find a solution for this because of the miniature skating. Here it's shove it, kickflip, and 180. Those are the basic tricks. Almost every other tricks are like combinations of them. And like a 360 flip, maybe you know it. It's like, in our case, 2 times the shove it plus the kickflip. And then the more tricks happened at once, the more complex the shape becomes and the more difficult it looks. Yes, those are those explanation posters. Yeah, here a small video of our setup. We got a big screen in the back with the explanation poster showing in a loop animation for the visitors. But also we have the small screen. It's not in the focus now. Yes. We have a small screen over the ramp. It's for the scores and for the time left from the skaters run, and also for leaderboards. This is also a part of the TouchDesigner setup, which is Linus showing to us later. This is also running parallel with the visuals on the ramp. Yeah, and there you can see a small mini game also, but we explain this later. Yeah. You can keep on. No, the next one.
The next one.
Oh, okay. No, I can say something to this too. Here's the video again. But besides the generated tricks, we also got full competition progresses. Sadly, we don't have it here. Maybe Linus can show us it later. Yes, we have a full run with the opening animation when the skater comes in and the athlete starts. We have a timer for starting the run, a closing animation with the score, and some audio-active like screensavers when the visitors can get integrated, and when they're clapping, for example, the visuals getting bigger and bigger, and they get like a they can see whatever they do. Yeah, now you can keep going to the next one. Yes. So our concept, the key point is after the skater finished the run, here you can see the whole run again showing as a static picture on the ramp again. And when you keep going one more time, we have the pre-configured poster layouts for each athlete. Here it's Tony Hawk. We did some crazy names. Maybe someone can recognize it. It's a bit different. Yes, we have pre-configured poster layouts for each athlete, and after run, you can get your visuals as a static one on the poster in real time. Because of the whole setting, we can get the run directly on the poster layout, and after that, the festival organization can print it out and handle it direct to the athlete. Yes, and on top of this, after the festival, you can scan your personal poster, and you can place it wherever you want as an AR model. There you can look over it again and share it and compare it with others however you want. Yeah, you can see it here. It's like you have the poster and the AR model of the mini ramp is coming out and shows the one you got. You can size it however, like a normal AR model.
Next one.
Yeah, you can keep going. Yes, the last step of this complex is the website. We designed a small website for the festival. It's mainly for collecting all the run posters of the athletes and from the visitors. You can also download the poster afterwards in the gallery. In our concept was that as a visitor, you can also, for example, imitate runs from the pros, or you can do your own run and try to reach the highest score under the visitors, like a small competition. Or you can also create with the visuals an artwork for, like, you don't skate for scores, so you skate for like aesthetics. So you can do on the fingerboard ramp your own aesthetic poster, however you want. Yes, that's it.
Yeah, and now we're looking at the mini game again that we made. So this is just for nice for the persons that don't really have a lot of contact with skating before, because like with these simple mini games, for example, this one, you just have to chase the little geometry, and if you chase it like gets to another spot on the ramp. So this is just nice for the persons that don't really have anything to do with skating very much, because everybody just sees the goal immediately, and it's also nice for the skaters because they get to know their own sport on a different level. Yeah, and this is the screensaver or one of the one of the screensaver visuals, which is also audio reactive.
Sorry.
Wait, one before, yeah, this one, yeah, which is also audio reactive. So this will just run when there's like a pause or something, and nothing really goes on the ramp. So like the crowd can interact with the visuals and maybe make some noise or something. Yeah, and now I will go into the setup a little bit. And for that, I will try to share my screen. Easy, I think you have to close your stream. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So it starts, of course, with a camera input. And as Eric already mentioned, we made it with color tracking. So I have also like some neon object right here, because we found out that neon colors work the best for this color tracking. And we just store like an image, a static image in here for a reference for the color. And then we can like translate this to the HSV values and put this into the chroma key, so it just works like a green screen, but like the other way around, as you can see right here. And then if we multiply this with an UV, we automatically get like the UV coordinates of all the pixels that are this color. And we can then take the average out of these to get like 1 point for stop instancing. And yeah, but we want a line behind the skater. So we did this with cache and some cache selects. So right here, we can see, okay, it's lagging a bit. We have like the position currently right here. And on the other side of the texture is like the position 30 frames ago. So that's how this works. And out of this, we can then convert it into SOPs, and we get our line here really quick. So yeah, my laptop is a bit slow right now, so I don't know. I think you can see what I mean, but it's running really slow. And then, as we said, there's also like trick recognition, and I will show this to you really briefly. The tricks that can be recognized are the stall and the grind. And as Eric already said, the stall is like when the skater just stays on one of these copings, and the grind would be if he slides on it. And for both of the tricks, there are basically two things that have to be true for the trick to be recognized. Okay, I'm trying to get a stall right here. Yeah, okay. So this would be a stall because I just stayed on the coping, and yeah, it doesn't really work right now because I'm on 5 FPS, but yeah, I think you saw the grind a little bit. Anyways, it's like these are just like if statements for the three positions of the copings, like for here, here, and here. So if the skater is on one of these three positions, there will be a signal from like 1 going into these two operators here. And for the stall, it measures like the distance of the first point and the 20th point in the line. And if this distance is really low, the program just recognizes the skater as he's standing still. And for example, if I'm just standing still in the middle of the ramp, you can see here we get a 1, but the trick doesn't really execute because we are not in the right position. So I always, for both of the tricks, I have to get a signal of 2 because the position and the movement of the skater has to be right. And then, yeah, it's just connected to speed operator here. So like the longer you hold the trick, the more the value counts up. And we can then use these speed values to set them into the geometry that's been generated for the tricks. For example, I tried to make a stall again. It's not really working out that well because, yeah, it's really slow. But yeah, okay, you can see here it's getting bigger and more complex. So I'm just getting the values in here, and then I multiply it for different parameters, and I have them set in here in different parameters. So it just grows and gets more complex, and it's basically the same for the grind. So these are the 2 tricks that can be recognized. And down here we have the other 3 tricks, and they are just working on press. Like I have the MIDI controller right here, and I can just press the tricks. So for example, if I'm making a kickflip, it would look like this. If I'm making like a shove it would look like this. And then there's also the 180 that would look like this. And that's just working by displacing the line that's already been rendered. So this is in top space, not in subs. And then there's basically yeah, all of the visuals. But then we also have a counter, for example. Oh yeah, this is, by the way, the siphon stream that went out for the tablet, and this one is the display for the ramp. So this is like the tablet that you saw above the ramp, and here we also have the timer, and you can see if I'm making like tricks. For example, I'm trying a stall again. Oh yeah, the counter is like connected to this, and it counts up automatically. And same with like when I press on tricks, it also counts up the points. So this is all connected with each other. And what we can also do is to look at the whole line we just drove. And this is the point that's important for the posters that we saw before. For example, here it's automatically like mapped onto the poster. So this, if you were connected to a printer, this could be printed directly. And yeah, as Eric already mentioned, we have some little like animations in here as well. For example, here the try again animation. Okay, it's because of this. So now it should work. It doesn't work. Okay, maybe it's because I have. No, it's because I have paused. Oh, sorry. So now it works. Yeah, this would be like a try again animation if the skater fails. Or we had like some opening animation to announce the skater, like here, as well as the closing animation after the skater has finished his run. Yeah, and this is also like processed after the rendering. And now the last thing we can look at in the setup is maybe the mini game. Okay, yeah, the mini game is basically just like the positions. If the positions collide, then the counter will go up, and the counter is like connected to a seed of a noise. So the position is connected with the noise, and it's like randomized every time the position of these two collide. But yeah, then let's just do the last slide. Easy. Okay, yeah. So we also made some branded objects like these festival straps, and like the fingerboard is also branded. And yeah, that's basically it with the with the presentation. Yeah, we also had the big skateboard right here. And yeah, that's it with the presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
very, very impressed. That's a super cool project. And I really like your aesthetic. And like generally it's very refreshing because like both of like because of the aesthetic. It's very like minimal in these lines. I don't know, just I haven't really seen something like that exactly. And then that you're not tracking humans for once, because it's often, you know, just like human body tracking is kind of the standard, which is cool, but it's kind of nice to see something else once in a while. So it's very refreshing. Are you planning on actually incorporating this with actual skateboards or like actual skaters? I mean,
We
yeah.
had oh, if you want, you can say it. Okay.
Yeah. So yes, I agree.
Yeah. So we had a little issue with the Spinx because we couldn't really get it, so we couldn't test it out, and therefore, like, we couldn't really try it out in real life. The main idea was to like try it out with point clouds and stuff, but in the end, we really set a focus on the mini ramp and try to execute it there as good as we can, because we only had 2 months for this whole project, and yeah, that's why.
Yeah.
We
And
didn't
the
really
project was also like, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
The project was also like a real project in Ravensburg with a like real what's the name? Company
Like,
behind it to organize it. And like they were also at our final presentations. They were there and they looked at all the different teams that made different stuff. And it a bit depends on them as well if they want to have the concept for the festival or if they don't want to have it. Because for like a big festival and a real ramp, it would be another question how to project it and stuff like this. So yeah, we. Yeah.
all right, thank you guys. More questions gonna be later after the other talks, also from the audience. So anybody who has questions now, note them down. And we're gonna continue with our second speaker, like Heckaman.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you for coming. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but I'm going to be taking a bit of a higher level approach and talking through a few kind of design principles that I think through when designing interactions for public installations, specifically those that are intended to be used in spaces where there are a lot of people coming through, potentially unmonitored, and often unanticipated circumstances that can arise. So that is going to be what I'm focusing on, and then I'll go through some examples of my own work that supports some different points, as well as some work from others that I think is very on point. So a little bit about me first. My name is Lake Heckaman. I'm Brooklyn-based new media artist. My professional and technical background was in mathematics and data science. And then I found TouchDesigner, and the rest is history. I create interactive installations that are focusing on how people interact with the world and how those interactions shape our experience of the world and inherently lead to subjective interpretations of reality. I think that new media art, specifically interactive new media art, is fundamentally different in that it allows you to explore this interaction and the relationship between different people, different objects, and things like that in a much more hands-on way than old media and a lot of the other pieces of art and types of art that people are used to seeing, which I think is very exciting. And a powerful place for us all to be engaged in. I also work as a freelance interaction designer and creative technologist on commercial projects around the world. I've done like weather reactive hotel facades to permanent installations in museums and music videos and a bunch of different stuff for hire. And then finally, I lead TouchDesigner workshops through the Node Institute and teach online via YouTube and Patreon. So some of you may have seen me around. If not, I hope to see you in the future. And then I put my portfolio and Instagram up on the top. So I'd love to catch you later there. So getting into kind of the interaction design principles, these are 3 of the guiding forces that I keep in mind when I'm designing a new installation or turning a piece of generative work into an installation. So these 3 core principles, which we'll be diving into each of in turn. One is build intuition from the viewer about your piece of work with legible interactions that support observational learning. Number 2 is leverage physical interfaces and tactile feedback when you can. Personal preference, but I will speak a lot more about why. And then 3, enable and promote experimentation through interaction, which basically means don't expect everybody to use your installation like you expect them to use it. So jumping into the first one, legibility and intuition really just means that you want the user to be able to understand immediately when they touch or begin interacting with your installation, exactly what their input is and the feedback that they get from that. We want that to be connected and legible in the sense that a interaction leads immediately to a concurrent response in the visual work in a way that is visually, haptically, auditorily, like whatever the medium is, you want it to be tied to the interaction very legibly for 2 reasons. One, for the viewer themselves, to be looking and saying, okay, I have done a cause, I see the effect. This builds intuition, and in my experience, makes the piece more immersive and like fun, frankly, to interact with. And 2, perhaps more importantly, it allows observers that are elsewhere in the room who maybe haven't interacted with the work yet to watch others interact with it. And legibility is what will allow those viewers to learn about the installation and start to build some intuition about how they can then interact with it, and a lot of times get more excited about it. You see somebody interacting with a piece and you're like, oh, I can imagine this person making a movement, a gesture, whatever, and seeing the piece react and putting those 2 pieces together in your mind. To me, that's like the best way to get somebody excited about your installation specifically. One of the things that I have found most sad, which I'll touch on later, is when you have a bunch of people standing in front of an installation that you made and nobody can figure out how to use it. It's truly like one of the worst feelings. And so I think legibility is one of the most important things for me when I'm designing and where I like to start. The last piece is a little bit harder to do sometimes, but I think very worthwhile. And that is, if it works, correlating the interaction intensity to the effect intensity in the visual piece, which is hopefully kind of able to see for those of you that are screen sharing. But here, like as this woman is moving faster across the screen, the actual interaction is more intense. So that's also just building more intuition because it feels like real life. If you move faster, you expect the results, air or splash in water, like whatever, be faster. And so I think that borrowing these relationships that people have built a lot of intuition around just by living life and using them in interaction design is very helpful because 1, it does a lot of work for you, and 2, it goes a very long way towards making it feel like magic, which is, I think, still kind of what we're trying to do. So yes, that is principle number 1, legibility and intuition. So moving on to the next slide for those following along, physical interface and tactile feedback. This is also, I think, very important a little bit more personal preference on the type of interaction interface, but when I talk about tactile feedback and a physical interface, what I really mean is something that you can touch and hold in your hands or elsewhere, I suppose, on the body that allows interaction. Specifically different from, let's say, a Connect where you have just like a player index, whatever, wave your arms. That is gestural, but it's not tactile because the person isn't actually like touching another physical surface to interact with the work. And in my opinion, the tactile feedback adds one more layer of connection between the viewer and the artwork and kind of turns the viewer into more of a participant, which I like. I think also, at least like when I was a kid, I remember walking along like a stairway or a wall and just like running your finger along different grooves, like in the cinder block walls or like in the trim on the side of a building. And just simple things like that, physically connecting with the environment around you in a very tactile way, to me brings you closer to that environment. So I really like to use tactile feedback and touch based interactions whenever possible because yeah, I think it allows a little bit of a deeper connection between the viewer and the artwork. One level below that is using a tactile object that is perhaps used elsewhere in life that people have a lot of familiarity with. So something like a ball or a piano keyboard. I have some examples on the next slide. A flashlight. I think Harvey's done some very cool installations using flashlights, so I won't go more into that example, but you'll probably see it later. I think that choosing these objects, one, gives you something tactile, gives the viewer something tactile to use, and then two, kind of jumpstarts the intuition on how to interact with the piece, because everybody knows if you pick up a ball, you know, throw it to somebody else, catch it yourself, twist it around, move it. Like that's things that everybody is very comfortable with and have done since we were all probably children. And to me, that helps one establish some comfortability in the interactive installation because a lot of times viewers are like, I just big crazy lights, like a lot of stuff going on. I don't know exactly how to start. And so having something that's comfortable and has historical context can help bridge that gap and then also get people started without instruction, which again, personal preference, but I prefer to have the installations work without instruction and people to kind of explore and be able to find their way. This is a nice trailhead sometimes for that exploration. So I don't always do that. We'll talk about sensors a little bit later, but I've seen some very cool installations and I do try to use this concept whenever I can. To me, it seems like a good unification of the tactile feedback and then also bringing more context in for new participants. And then finally, this includes not just literally your installation, but also the space that the installation exists in. And so there are times where, if we're talking about physical interaction or like how many people can be in a space, those types of constraints may determine what interactions you can design, what sensors you can use, and stuff like that. So it's important to just think about the physical interface and tactile feedback very holistically, and not just what is the person going to touch to move the artwork, but where is that going to be housed before they touch it? What's going to happen afterwards? What happens if 2 or 3 people all try and use the same physical object? Do we need more than one? All these considerations, I think, fall under this umbrella. And it's very helpful and I think essential to think about the design of the interactions, including the physical space that it's in, which is subtle, but the best installations that I've seen have used this to very, very strong interaction design. So this is not my work, but I love it, especially for this example. I'm sure most of you have seen this before, but using a physical interface that's very tactile, sand, everybody knows when you see piles of sand, you move it around with your hands. It's like, you know, the oldest thing in the book. And I think this is a wonderful usage of that tactile interface with a lot of historical context It makes it very intuitive to interact, and you can see exactly what you're doing and how it's changing the artwork exactly where you're touching. So I think it's a very good example of a lot of that we just talked about. But there's also a ton of different items or other interaction interfaces that can be used in the same way. So like sand, you could also, I've seen some work and have developed installations using like scales and different like stuff like piles of sand on various scales. And so you can move sand from one to the other with your hands, and that changes the weight. And that's another form of interaction. The finger on the wall, which again is just something that I remember doing as a kid, and it got me thinking a lot about how touching surfaces makes you feel more connected to them. I use LiDAR sensors a lot in my work, so that's kind of where that idea and passion came from. An Xbox controller or other joystick, it's a little bit more defined in what you can do with it, but everybody knows how to use it. And so if you have one of these sitting on a pedestal, it's pretty clear exactly what you're supposed to do if you're a viewer and you walk up to the installation. And then finally, this 3D printed ball. One of the artists that I exhibited with at Art Basel last year had an accelerometer inside one of these custom made balls. And so again, the audience came and picked it up and started twisting it around in their hands. And as they were twisting and moving the ball, the accelerometer and gyro data was all used to drive visual installation. And that was pretty cool to see. So just a couple other examples of more outside the box ways to use physical interfaces and bring in some tactile feedback. So the last of the 3 points is going to be experimentation via interaction. I'll play this video now because this child just runs fully into the wall to underscore that you can never really tell how people are going to use the installations that you create, and there can be guardrails put in place. But I think every installation that I've ever done has been interacted with in ways that I never intended, and sometimes explicitly tried to eliminate. And you just can't do anything about it, especially when it's in public and when there's several hundred people coming through in an evening. There's just not much to do except for think about designing your interactions in such a way that supports experimentation and kind of like expects people to do stuff in ways that you are not thinking about. So yes, I think it's very important to keep in mind. It's a little bit harder to design for. In the past, for example, I was working on like a photo booth installation, and there was not enough space for anyone more than one person. And so we assumed it would be just one person at a time, photo booth. It would be great. And eventually there were like 6 people that were all cramming themselves into this little photo booth space. And so some of the interactions like face tracking and things like that we had worked with simply didn't work the way that was intended. Other times it could be if you were trying to do something like skeleton tracking, but there is a snowstorm and everyone's wearing parkas and it's very cold in your installation room, and all of a sudden you don't have the same kind of definition between arms and legs, which made that specific installation harder to work with too. So over time, I've learned to try and choose better forms of sensors, which is our next topic for public installations, but then also think about how I can bring the concept of experimentation into the interaction design and support those users who want to be creative. Because at the end of the day, that's a lot of the point, right? Like we want to create interactive installations that provide a venue for creative expression and like co-creation for a lot of our viewers. So one thing that I would love to hear about later is unexpected interactions that others have come across in their work. I'm sure there's some pretty good stories. For example, one person was telling me about a water reactive artwork that she installed on a college campus. And then late at night, everyone started interacting with it, but not using water. They were just peeing on it, which was very unexpected. And I think that installation was taken down. So just goes to show you can never really understand anything. So this brings us to kind of the two different types of environments that make sense to think about as you're designing and building interactions and interactive installations. The controlled environment is, I think, what everybody's used to working in the studio, where I'm sitting right now. Either just you, or a performance or event space where you have a lot of control over who's coming in, who's interacting, if you can maybe fix the problems that arise as they arise. But controlled environments are, I think, the exception and not the rule. And so while it's easy to design interactions for them, I think it is imprudent to do so and makes a lot more sense to expect everything to be an uncontrolled environment, which is one that comes a lot closer to a public exhibition or a museum installation or a gallery opening with an interactive piece of work. All of these things that have an unknown number of concurrent visitors, an arbitrary amount of interactions, and most likely going to be unmonitored with nobody really around to like know if it breaks, tell you if it breaks, whatever. And so it is obviously much more important to think about robust interaction designs for the uncontrolled environments, which starts with sensors that we use. So this is not exhaustive at all and certainly reflects my personal opinion. But from my experience, things that work well in controlled environments like webcams or cameras running CV models, skeleton tracking, things like leap motion, those sensors tend to break down often or all the time when there are more than, let's say, 1 to 5 people involved, depending on which one of those you're using. And again, going back to my earlier point, one of the worst feelings that I've experienced is when there are people trying to get the skeleton tracking to catch them. They're just like, waving around, trying to move. It's not working. Everybody's sad. Everybody's frustrated. And I'm just like, sitting in the back, tired and sad. So I try to pretty much not use any of those types of sensors for any installation that's going to be in an uncontrolled environment. With the exception, as I note below, with something like commercial skeleton tracking setup, like the Z cameras, those are pretty good and can get like a pretty arbitrary amount of skeletons very quickly. But it's not really for budget, and there are still performance ceilings depending on the number of people. So like after a couple dozen, it still gets a little bit heavy and requires some other more in-depth programming to be able to sort that out. As I mentioned before, LiDAR and infrared cameras, so either like a multi-touch infrared setup or relative position, like planar LiDAR sensors are some of my favorites. I think it's great because the interactions are 1, tactile, 2, intuitive, and 3, pretty hard to break because you just set them up and allow touches to occur anywhere in your zone. I think it's one of my favorites for large public installations because you can have hundreds of people all touching at the same time, assuming you have enough sensors at least. And again, going with the tactile interactions, there is something about just touching the wall or their surface, whatever it is, that I think is much more satisfying than interacting via the air gap. And then finally, depth cameras, which are probably the most budget, not necessarily always optimal, but I think remain robust a lot better and a lot longer than skeleton tracking setups and other stuff like that. So for those, I will often not be using any type of player tracking or whatever with Connect, but rather just like depth with a depth filter, basically. So anybody within this interaction zone, take their silhouette, and you've all seen that. It does get us back to interacting with just waving your hands and gestures, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. So that's kind of the other thing that I will use. And the other thing I'll note is using these in conjunction with each other and establishing multiple interaction layers can also be pretty fun, especially if, let's say, you want people to be able to interact up front and close, but then also maybe further back and not get in everybody's way. So there are ways to have these interaction designed so that the sensors can play off of each other and maybe like incentivize interaction in one area in a certain way and another area in another way, which I think can be pretty helpful. For example, when I've done installations with like right angle screens, sometimes having the different screens, like the different angles, have different forms of interaction, like one via depth camera and one via LiDAR, prevents people from all just kind of clogging up in the center where the screens intersect. So a couple ideas there. Again, just my personal experience and opinion, but this is what I like to use for public installations. I mentioned a lot of this already, so I'll go through it pretty quick. But in uncontrolled environments, yeah, definitely recommend having the ability to interact tons of people concurrently. I think most problems that I've had in my installations occurred when I thought there would not be more than 20 or 30 people at a time. And then a group of 500 students comes through the museum, and then, everything breaks. So now from the beginning, I try to assume that there's going to be several hundred of people at some point and work with that as an expectation. Again, expecting the unexpected, which brings us to leveraging physical components or constraints, parts of the architecture. If there are interactions that you want to limit, I find it best to do so not via software, because then you end up with somebody who was the nth person. If you made, I will support up to 30, and then person 31 comes along, that 31st person will never be able to figure out why they're not interacting properly, like what they're doing wrong. And I find that to be something I like to avoid, because then that person feels like they're doing it wrong or like it's broken. And that is, again, kind of removes the magic from the piece. So physical constraints, either in some way reducing crowd flow in front of the installation if you can structurally, or by using physical interfaces like the balls or joysticks or whatever, and limiting those actual literal physical interfaces can also help to intuitively reduce the number of people interacting at once without actually sacrificing the interactivity at all. And then finally, definitely be careful about sensor placement and how a person interacting with the sensor will disrupt interactions for others. For example, like, very simple, if somebody is in front of somebody else, everybody behind them from the point of view of the sensor is going to be blocked. And so depending on what the physical space is for people to be in front of the installation and how that's configured, you want to be careful about sensor placement and blocking, like using 2 or 3 LiDAR sensors to cover a decent sized surface instead of just one, so that you don't have a person touching here that prevents somebody touching here from being picked up and able to interact fully with the installation. So this is coming to the end, a case study, or really just me playing this video of an installation that I did and had at our Basel last year, and just kind of going through how I was thinking about each of these different principles while I was designing it. I think I will also drop the YouTube link in here because it'll be easier for those who are not following along. And so there's that. Yeah, so as I was designing this and thinking through it, I really wanted to have a physical substrate interaction surface. And so I started thinking about, as a kid, different types of stuff that I would do to kill time. And I thought about those like little geometric prisms that you would arrange in different configurations and like make some cool patterns or whatever. And a lot of times they were on these light tables. And so I decided I wanted to run with that, found some light tables, and then seeded using other physical objects, rings, pieces of rope, and other stuff that viewers could then use to place on the light tables, creating a contrast that I was reading through, in this case, actually just a webcam, and then pulling those objects in and using them as obstacles in my fluid simulation, which was then artwork that the viewers were interacting with. It was very nice because there was some intuition built when viewers would come up and see the state of the table left after the last viewers came and started playing with it. So you could see, like, for example, on the right, rings lying on the table corresponding to these ringed obstacles in the simulation, which then prompted the next person to come up and be like, oh, okay, I know what to do here. I will just move around some stuff, and then they all start rolling. It was also very clear to the onlookers as a viewer was moving stuff around exactly what was happening, which was important for me because this was a pretty crowded exhibition, and their people had to be very self-service. Experimentation-wise, it was interesting to see. I was wondering if people would bring their own objects or start to use like found materials and stuff like that. And indeed, they did, using cell phones, like pens, paper clips, a bunch of different stuff, which is very good to see. And that experimentation was pretty fun because people started like stacking things, and I didn't really expect there to be much depth off of the table, so that didn't always work exactly as I expected, but led to some cool visual results and other things like that. So I thought this was a good kind of way to wrap things up and just go through how I practically incorporated a bunch of those concepts into this installation. If anybody has any other thoughts on this, I would love to hear it later. And I think this slide is everything that I just talked about. And so that is the end of my presentation, and I'll look forward to taking questions when appropriate.
Thank you so much. That's a very unexpected overview about interaction design or interactivity. Much appreciated. I think there was a lot of good stuff in there. I'm just wondering, how long have you been using TD? Because I've watched some of your tutorials, of course, and I've really loved them. And it feels like you've been in this kind of field for quite some time.
Thank you. I started in mid 2019, so like 5 years.
Nice. Yeah, same here. Cool. And then we will go to our last but not least presenter, Harvey Moon.
Hello, can you all hear me? Okay, sorry about that. Okay. Going live. You all see? Got a logo? Yeah? Okay, cool. Yeah, that's the first page. Okay. All right, so today I'm actually going to step a little bit higher level. Appreciate Lake's talk, and I think there'll be some overlaps, but I wanted to talk more about building a sustainable practice, building sustainable systems, and all the things I've learned over the years that I've sort of incorporated into our group. I guess I'll step back a minute. I run a little company in LA called Spectra Studio, and I can just show a little bit of the work, and then we can dive into where we come from and what we do. So primarily, our work is about shared experiences. So how do you bring people together? How do you create an environment, an experience that people come to and experience collectively? So we were really adamant about creating the environment, creating the space, having time spending it together, and interactivity is a great way of kind of collaborating together on some playful experience. And so we really avoid a lot of screen-based or VR or AR experiences, just because those are more catered to a single user, and we're trying to build a multiple user experience, a multiple shared experience. So in short, we combine art with the possibilities of technology to transform ideas into tangible, multi-sensory experiences that are meant to be shared. So the shared experience is where I really find my passion, and where I think the core of our collective is really focused on. The most recent project we did is actually pretty close to some of you guys in Cologne. I'll show you a little teaser here. It's a Harry Potter immersive with. Okay, so the Harry Potter immersive interactive is a pretty large, one of these ticketed experience spaces, and we really wanted to bring something new to the table. We wanted to bring a lot of interactivity. And basically every single room has some form of interactivity, whether it's human people tracking, as Lake was talking about a little bit before. But primarily the interaction Lake also mentioned are these magic wands. So these magic wands we developed with infrared LEDs in the tip. So wherever anyone was pointing, we could detect where they were pointing using infrared cameras. And that was on a different visual spectrum than all of the projectors or camera systems. So because of that, we could project and see where they were pointing at any given time and use those gestures that guests brought as part of the visual real-time projected imagery. And a lot of this comes from sort of research that we do. Lake had mentioned this flashlight effect that we created, and it technically is the same exact thing. We've got these little flashlights with LEDs in the tip, so they're invisible flashlights. And wherever you point on the wall, we can use as a mask to then reveal or hide different layers of video or activate different parts of content. So pretty simple to do technically, but when you can put these tools in your tool belt and you have this ability to add layers of technology, then it becomes really easy to bring it to the next client and bring something that they wouldn't have ever thought of before. And this was a really great technique for this specific installation because, as you can guess, they're trying to put a lot of people through this space and every single person gets a wand. They want it to be the cheapest wand possible. And it's basically a keychain flashlight. So there's nothing really more to it. And the technology in there I mentioned was infrared. So a lot of the sensing was just with infrared cameras. But just like a television, you can get infrared receiver sensors, just tiny little LED-sized modules. And we littered those around in physical systems so that wherever people pointed, they could turn on lights, play sounds, or in this case, there was these physical orbs that had motors in them that would spin up the liquid whenever they pointed at different orbs. So overall, the technology was very simple, but when put together into the experience, when brought into this magic, as Lake was saying, people really kind of fall into it and they really love it and have a lot of fun experimenting with it. We do a lot of different projects. This is another one we did with Gmonk, which I think Greg was in the chat here. Saw this one in real life. It was like a 30-foot sculpture we built in Toronto, and then it was all sound reactive. So we had a whole audio score and used TouchDesigner as like the core of the system to build all the visuals, all of the generative sound reactive movements. You'll have to listen to this one on your own. We also had like 10 lights around and lasers, and Gmonk likes to throw all the gear at it. But again, it's about how do you bring people into the space and have them move around and feel that presence of that object, of that sculpture or that experience, and how do you share that with other people? The scale and the space, as Lake was saying, it's really important to consider when people walk into an environment, how do they feel like they're a part of that experience and not just, a spectator? Like, you want to make them feel like they're inside of it, that they're enveloped by it, and they're not just passing through. Okay, what's next? So sort of the foundation of all of our projects is this platform we call PrimeFrame. And over the years, I've been sort of building all of these different tools for different projects and then consolidating them into one master project. And there's a lot of reasons why this has really worked well for us, but primarily it's so we can keep rebuilding and re-engineering one system rather than doing all of these other things and kind of getting split off in different directions. building this platform with a longer time form has helped us avoid short-term project burnout. So as some of you might know, like working in this industry and TouchDesigner especially, it's really quick and fast and easy to make things. Work for 15 or 20 minutes or an hour or two. You can pull it off in, really quick timelines, faster than most other development platforms. However, you can get really burned out doing projects every month or every few weeks that you throw out and make a new one. And so for our team to have a longer term goal and a perspective that was growing and building a platform that was bigger than this one client always made us feel like, okay, well, we can incorporate these learnings into the next time, and we can build these tools and improvements for the next client. And if the client stays with us, they'll have a better product next time. So this is a view of our system, and on the left side, you'll see all of these plugins. So it's a very dynamic system. The whole intention is that we wanted to have all the features and then pick and choose based on the client, based on the project, what things we want to use or what things we want to avoid. And this was actually something we spent a lot of time with a user interface designer to make sure that the client also understood how to navigate it and have some insight into what was going on the system. So when you have something like the Harry Potter project where there's like 20 machines, how do you make sure that, if something goes wrong on site, the technician there can at least identify before calling you at 3 a.m. what's going on, what's happening. And so I've learned over the years that having a well-designed UI saves you a lot of time of questions that they'll have calling you up. What button do I press to do this, to load this? If it's intuitive and clear and easy for them, you're going to spend less time supporting it and teaching them and working through it. So on a really high level, this is sort of how PrimeFrame works. There's one system JSON file that designates how the whole platform starts. There's one tow file that runs everything. And then within that, there's configurations for each computer, each node, we call it. So each node gets a collection of channels. That could be projectors, it could be UI, like you just saw, could be audio or LED channels. And then those multiple nodes and channels can access a plate, and that media plate is sort of the video player or an audio player or something that does the generative visuals that all of these channels can pull from to play that content. And then all of this stuff is interconnected through MQTT, which we really, really love because every single dynamic talks that gets pulled in can have its own subscription to its own endpoint, its own topic. And so every dynamic part anywhere on any node can all talk to each other seamlessly over MQTT using this published subscription model. It's been so powerful for us. And again, all of this is running in TouchDesigner. And over the years, really what I've learned about building a sustainable system is you got to have a team that can pull it off. So you can do a lot alone, but you can do a ton more if you have a good team. And when you're doing these projects, you're gonna work with other teams, and you're gonna spend a lot of time with these people. And there's a lot of adjacent industries that we could get into, advertising and such, where it might not always be the most fun experience to work with these people. And over time, I've learned it's less about what you do and more about those people that you spent the time with and enjoying that time. We're all here because we love doing this stuff. It's a passion, but you don't want to put your passion next to people that aren't appreciating and respecting it and, have that similar passion with you. So make sure you find the team. Here's my team. I'm so proud of having them around. They are just fantastic people, and I've been really trying to cater a team that loves to work together and can keep doing things, all over the place. And here's a couple of our jobs, some in Harry Potter, a couple in Mexico City, fun stuff. You know, the biggest thing for me about Spectra is that it allows us some time and affordance to spend time on our own art practice and our own community. So building a community around these experiences and bringing artists in is really what brings me the most joy. And so I don't know if anyone here was in LA about a year and a half ago, but we did host a TouchDesigner event. Here's our favorite Matthew Reagan over here, and some other good friends of ours did some talks. We did a live code event, which was the most fun with some, I don't know if anyone's heard of Hydra or these sorts of things, but really interesting adjacent communities of live coders doing performances. And then we'll do open calls just about every month. We've done an open call, just a very casual, bring your work and project on our walls and play around. And there's so much, you know, collective need for this sort of stuff that there's so many artists that don't have access, that don't have the ability to show in this way, that just giving a little bit brings so much more back from the community, and that's the sort of thing that I really appreciate and try to foster. So thinking long term about how do you build a community, how do you build a team, how do you build a platform that can keep working with you, and thinking about the 5 or 10 year plan and not the, okay, what are we going to do next? What is the next project that we have to do, or how can we build something that's going to last a little bit and be a sustainable practice? So that's my quick proposal presentation here on Spectra. If you're ever in LA, come by, say hi. I got some URLs here. Spectra.studio is our link, or follow us on Instagram.
Thank you so much, man. That's beautiful. Both your works that you've done, and I mean, I've been following you for a while. You've been in the TouchDesigner game for ages, right?
Yeah. Sometimes I'm embarrassed to say how long it's been. It's like 13 years now. It's a wild ride. I did not expect that it would go this, and I'm very, very happy and proud of the touch community. And like, you know, one of the other things that's sort of I'm reflecting on is the way Derivative treats their community and the way Derivative cares about all of us, you know, like we are their family. I don't know if they're in here still, but you know, they really do love the art, and they have a passion for the work, and they really want to support. And all of the things we do, we could not have done without those giant shoulders, you know, to stand on. So
Yeah, totally.
big shout out.
Yeah, generally the community and like both how they treat the community, how they keep building it up, and then also kind of the people that are attracted to TouchDesigner is just amazing. So yeah, it's really good advice. Also, kind of building your team, something I've been thinking about as well, and I think it's generally it's super nice to work with people, and especially this kind of community. So what I would do now is go over to the Meetup room one on the left. You can see that on the channel, where on the server where all the other channels are. We go to Meetup room 1, and then everybody and anybody can either, you know, through text and like through speaking or through the chat, can just ask questions to the speakers or anybody really. So let's move over there.